So it's a little windshield tour here in Gettysburg. So this building to my right, and the porta-johns too, are at like the, I don't even know if I call it's not a visitor center, but it's just the kind of the entrance to the park. And this road here is the Emmitsburg Road that goes down to Emmitsburg, Maryland. It's also known as Business 15. It's also known as Steinware Avenue. When I turn out of here, I'm going to turn to the right, but I'm going to turn to the left a little bit first. And the building you'll see off in the distance, the large barn, is part of the Eisenhower farm. That's where Dwight Eisenhower and his wife Mamie lived after they left the White House. They moved here to Gettysburg. General Eisenhower, President Eisenhower, was born down in Denton, Texas, but kind of grew up in Abilene, Kansas. And you see the sign on the left there for the Eisenhower Historic Site. It is located in the park, in the National Battlefield Park. So just to orient you, this road kind of runs right down the middle of the battlefield. To the right, it would be the south end of Cemetery Ridge and Round Top and Little Round Top. And then to the left would be what is called Seminary Ridge. So cemetery on the right, seminary on the left. And they're named for places that they kind of run through. The cemetery is the Evergreen Cemetery. That's where Cemetery Ridge gets its name. The National Cemetery that came after the battle, because the Evergreen Cemetery was there before the battle, that is adjacent to the Evergreen Cemetery. And if you're like an NFL fan, I can tell you that Steve Corson, who played for the Pittsburgh Steelers, is buried in the Evergreen Cemetery. So we're coming up on this farm. Directly ahead of us is the Sherfy farm. And to our left, again, is Seminary Ridge. And we're, you know, the fences that are here are kind of like they were during the battle, because this road was here. And, you know, so a lot of these fences would have been, of course, torn down by pickets or other troops in advance of like large infantry regiments, large lines of infantry. We just passed the Klingel House on the left, and we're coming up on the area where Pickett's charge occurred, and the Kodori farm is the one up here on the right. And this will give you an idea. We're basically coming into the borough of Gettysburg from the south. And as far as you can see in either direction is the battlefield. It's it is, if you're curious, it is the largest battlefield park in the nation. There are several that are big, but this one is the biggest. And that's why I always kind of say that if you come to Gettysburg and you only have one day, there is a kind of a windshield tour. It's like a car tour. You can pick up the brochure from the visitor center, although I don't know exactly what the status of the visitor center is right now because of the government shutdown. So I don't know how staffed it is. But there's probably something online. If you came through here, you could just hit the highlights. But if you really want to like comb over the battlefield and do things, it would be, you know, I would devote at least 3 days to it, but heck, you could devote a lifetime to it, because that's what some people have done. So I'm going to turn here, and we're starting to get into town. And actually, you know, I don't begrudge people making a living, but like that McDonald's you saw there, this area was all still in the battlefield. So before there was a lot of battlefield preservation, there you know, businesses, people owned the land and bought it. A lot of the farms were bought from the farmers after the battle, but there are a lot of areas that have been commercial and then later preserved by the Battlefield Trust that were important parts of the battle. So the road that you see directly in front of us, and by the way, this gate right here, you see this 2 stone pillars, this is actually where the original visitor center was. And that was like the entrance to the visitor center. And they've subsequently tore the visitor center down here because it was legit on the battlefield. And if you look past this silver truck up here, you can see the top of the dome of the Pennsylvania Memorial, which is the biggest memorial on the field. But anyway, they tore this visitor center down and they built a visitor center, you know, farther away from the battlefield. So as that sign says right there, this is the Taneytown Road. This goes to Taneytown, Maryland. And all of these roads were like, you know, on the 30th and 1st of July would have been clogged with troops. And as I turn left here, you're going to see the National Cemetery. And like I said, it's adjacent to, and in fact, if you look between the trees, there's a pile of dirt across from us. Those stones are actually in the Evergreen Cemetery that I mentioned earlier. But that's the national battlefield. And right up on top of this hill is approximately where Lincoln delivered the Gettysburg Address. So right when we kind of crest here, just to the right is where Lincoln is. And I'm sure it's probably pretty accurate that he delivered the Gettysburg Address at that place on November 19th, 1863. And the other thing that's interesting about the Gettysburg Address, and this will give you an idea of what the presidency was like back then. I mean, obviously Lincoln was the president of the United States, but he was not the principal speaker that day. He was asked to give some like brief remarks, essentially. And I always think that's kind of funny. So this is where the Taneytown Road and the Emmitsburg Pike intersect. It's actually Steinware Avenue. You can see that on the road sign. But as I turn right, the National Cemetery will be to our right. And we're just gonna kind of go down, and we're gonna meet up with PA 97, which is the Littlestown Road. Goes down to Littlestown, Pennsylvania, which is just north of the border, just north of the Mason-Dixon line. But Gettysburg is and was a crossroad town. A lot of highways come together here, and any place in central Pennsylvania, there's probably a road that kind of comes through Gettysburg that would get you there. And of course, like if you were to go down the Littlestown Road, past Littlestown, eventually you get to Westminster, Maryland, and places in, you know, southern Maryland. And all these towns were fairly vibrant, you know, places with, you know, a lot of them were mill towns or towns that, you know, there were a lot of businesses around the farming industry and stuff like that. And this part of town really wasn't here during the battle. This is an area that was built up after the battle. So most of what's here, well, actually probably there might be 1 or 2 buildings that were out here, but this was mostly open. And I guess I should have said that 97 is called Baltimore Street, but it does lead down through Littlestown, PA, and down to Westminster, Maryland. The funny thing is, it becomes 97 or stays 97 in Maryland, but 97 does not go to Baltimore. 97 actually goes farther south through Westminster and becomes, once you get down by DC, it becomes Georgia Avenue. But you know, if you got to Westminster, you would get on what is now Maryland 140, the Reisterstown Road, to go to Baltimore. I need somebody to unhitch the plow here so I can get through this intersection. And since anytime it's a spectacular day in the spring, summer, or fall, there's going to be a lot of people in Gettysburg. And you might say, well, why are you in Gettysburg? Well, I brought my daughter up to where my wife's working. They're going to go do something, and then I'm going to go clean a church up here. But actually, first I'm going to go to 7-Eleven and get a soda, because I'm almost out. And I can't do any real work unless I have a soda. But where we're going is right into the town square. And as we go up Baltimore Street here, we are getting into buildings that were here during the war. Gettysburg is the county seat of Adams County, Pennsylvania, and it was back then. So again, it was like governmental seat, merchants, crossroads, all of that. There were, you know, a lot of what's here in Gettysburg was here during the battle. And that building, that columned building on the right there, is the library, and there's a statue of Abraham Lincoln right there in front of it. And I always tell people, if they ask, I always say, hey, you know, Gettysburg is way more than just the battlefield. The town was here before the troops came, and troops came through here even before the battle. I mean, they just happened to converge here in July of 1863 or June 30th of 1863, because Buford's cavalry was already here in town. But a lot of the buildings you see here were here during the war. If a building was here during the war, like there's this one here that says Zodiac Astrology on the right. That building has a little brass plaque in between those two windows, and that's gonna say Civil War building on it. And any building in Gettysburg that was here when the battle happened in, like I said, July 1st, 2nd, and 3rd of 1863, all of those buildings have that exact same brass plate on them. And it's usually in a conspicuous place. But if you were to turn left here on Middle Street, that would take you out to Fairfield, Pennsylvania, which was one of the routes of retreat for the Army of Northern Virginia when they left. And by the way, I've driven a semi through this town. It's not something for the faint of heart. And this guy didn't really do a great job on the turn either. Oh, well, that's because it's an Amazon rental trailer. Or maybe it's just because he can't do a great job turning left. But this is the square. The tall, like beige colored building that you see to the right side of that truck trailer, that's the Gettysburg Hotel, or the Hotel Gettysburg. And that was where, you know, Lincoln stayed there when he visited Gettysburg in November of 1863. Also to the right, and I don't know if I'll be able to see it, if it'll get in the frame, but to the right is called the David Wills House. And he was a prominent citizen here, and Lincoln apparently visited with him. But this is the town center in Gettysburg. And getting back to what I was saying earlier about how there's a lot more in Gettysburg than just the battlefield. You know, there's a vibrant art scene here. There's two colleges in town, Gettysburg College and the Lutheran Seminary. And it's a, you know, like I said, a vibrant art scene. And when I say arts, I mean live music, you know, museums that aren't just Civil War related. There's also a lot of great restaurants here in town. So even if you come to Gettysburg and somebody's like, oh, I don't want to visit a battlefield, there's still lots of other cool things to do. So I'm pulling into the 7-Eleven where I'm going to get me a soda. And anyway, I hope that was informative. And if you do come to Gettysburg, let me know, and I'll give you some tips on things to do or places to go that you might not think about right off the bat. And even if you've been here once, there's always new stuff here. There's like an excursion rail system here that you can ride a train, and that's the railroad tracks. That railroad was being built when the battle happened. So anyway, I will talk to you guys soon. Bye.